The only way to discover the limits of the possible is to go beyond them into the impossible. The only way to discover the limits of the possible is to go beyond them into the impossible. Many of you are here today because you're keen to innovate, because you want to discover what's possible in you. Today, I'd like to talk about one cornerstone of innovation, which is called intrapreneurship. I want to teach you or tell you about how you can potentially leverage intrapreneurship to also discover what's possible. But first, before I start talking about intrapreneurship, let's talk about entrepreneurship. Who is an entrepreneur? The first face that comes to mind when I think of an entrepreneur is this one. Do you all know who he is? Yes, very famous. Steve Jobs, founder of Apple. I think everyone might know who he is. But he is not the only face of entrepreneurship. In fact, there are many other faces of entrepreneurship, and maybe you look at yourself in the mirror and you discover it in you as well. Let's look at a few other faces. This one you might know as well, Oprah Winfrey, American media executive, producer, actress, philanthropist. What you might not know about her is that in her childhood, she suffered actually quite a lot of poverty and a lot of personal tragedies before becoming the successful woman you see here today. And actually now, she's one of the most influential people in the world, but back when she was a child, maybe that wasn't so obvious. Let's look at these three faces. You probably have never seen these three faces before. They are Arun, Daewoo, and Soon Kang from South Korea, three sisters who started an internet dating app. Why? Because they were tired of the way they were dating themselves. And so they wanted to create an app for themselves and for their friends. They wanted an app that allowed people to connect more authentically over the internet. And so they created this app, and now it is responsible for 1 billion introductions and 100,000 happy couples. So that's a really great story about them. And how about this face? Does anyone know this face? His name is Jalen Bledsoe. And he looks quite young, don't you think? Actually, when he started his first business, he was 12 years old. That's right. 12 years old, he started an IT consulting company. And actually, he came from an underprivileged neighborhood. His parents were only 16 years old when they gave birth to him. So, when he was 12 and he decided to start his own IT consulting company, you can imagine a lot of people said, "That's crazy, that's impossible." He is 19 years old now, and he is the CEO of a company valued at $3.5 million. So again, this is the face of another possible entrepreneur for you to remember. So when you think about your own journey into entrepreneurship and innovation, you can remember these other faces. Now, let's challenge what we think is entrepreneurship. In my mind, entrepreneurship is a mindset. So if entrepreneurship is a mindset, it can be anyone. It can be male, it can be female, it can be young or old, white, black, brown, it doesn't matter. And also, entrepreneurship can happen anywhere. It doesn't have to be within a startup. It can be within business, government, NGO. I like this quote by Arash Asli, the CEO of Yocal.com. He says, "The entrepreneurial mindset is about being committed to your vision, regardless of the obstacles along the way. It is about seeing mistakes as an opportunity for growth and not as something to be feared. It is about approaching problems from a range of different ways." The reason I like this quote so much is because it contains so many of the key ingredients of the entrepreneurial mindset. And today, I'd like to focus on one aspect of that. One aspect is embracing failure. Now, failure is something that many of us fear. It is something that society has drilled into us to avoid at all costs. We must not fail, because it is seen as a potential symbol that maybe we're not good enough or that our idea is not workable. And you know what? Actually, we see successes celebrated, and it's so exciting when we see successes. But when we hear about failures, we don't hear about it too often, and usually it's not very good. But if you're interested in actually building a business, failure is an integral part of the journey. You have to know what does not work in order to move more quickly to know what does work. In fact, you have to find people that don't like your ideas to poke holes into them. You have to sell early prototypes of your product in order to get critical feedback from customers so you can make a better next product. Now, many of you might be entrepreneurs in the audience, so this is new and you already know all of this. But actually, for those of you who are not yet convinced that failure is a good thing, let's look at some examples of successful people who have failed a lot. Thomas Edison, he invented the light bulb. We're seeing that used all around here. He said, "I have not failed. I have just found 10,000 ways that won't work." That's fantastic. As an entrepreneur, you need to remember that every single day. How about the next one? This woman, I don't know if you know her or not. Her name is Arianna Huffington. She created a very popular news journal called the Huffington Post. She is the CEO of Thrive Global, and she's the author of 15 books. But in the early days, one of her first books was rejected 36 times. And you can imagine when you put all of your hard work into a book and it's rejected that many times, she didn't feel great about it. And she thought, maybe I should give up and change careers entirely. But instead, she got a bank loan and she kept going. And her advice is, you have to do what you dream of doing, even if you're afraid. Even while you're afraid, you still continue. Let's look at another example. We've got Rovio Entertainment, a video game company. This video game company produced 51 video games that didn't work. And they were near bankruptcy until this one. Do you know this one? It's been downloaded 3 billion times. It took them 52 tries to get it right. So, I think these are some good examples that persistence is needed to reach your ultimate vision. And that failure is a key part of the journey. Now, I'm here today to talk about intrapreneurship, which is a little different than entrepreneurship. So, what does it mean to be an entrepreneur on the inside? Now, while we start to hold what the entrepreneurial mindset might mean, let's start to challenge where entrepreneurship might occur. Actually, entrepreneurship doesn't have to be within a startup. It can be within an existing organization. And when you practice entrepreneurial work inside an existing institution, that's called intrapreneurship. So it's nothing more than that, just doing the work of entrepreneurship inside an existing organization. Now you might ask, why would I want to be an intrapreneur? Why not be the glorious entrepreneur that's celebrated? Yeah, maybe some of you are thinking this. Let's look at a few reasons. The first, when you are an intrapreneur working inside a business or government or NGO, one of the best things is you get a salary. You get a salary no matter what happens. And actually, that's quite important sometimes in life. So if the structure of your life does not allow you to take on the risk of being an entrepreneur right now, being an intrapreneur within your organization allows you to practice the skills of being an entrepreneur while still bringing your ideas to life. The next reason is access to resources. Now, as an entrepreneur, you can think about anything you want to do. But actually, you also have to build it all from the ground up. You have no resources right there for you. As an intrapreneur, you have access to technical experts, brands, also channels to market. As an entrepreneur, you have to build them all from the ground up, from scratch. And finally, I'd like you to consider this reason for becoming an intrapreneur. So this guy, Gandhi, I'm sure you know him as well. You must be the change you wish to see in the world. And I'll change that and I'll say, you must be the change you wish to see in the world at scale. Some of the world's trickiest problems require innovation within existing institutions to reach the scales required. So think about it. If you are someone who's interested in protecting the environment, potentially reducing plastic, You might want to think about working for a manufacturer that uses plastic in their packaging. Let's look at a company like Unilever. They're a company that actually produces 2 billion products for people in the world every single day. A company that produces that volume of products, if they make one small change in their packaging design to reduce plastic, it fundamentally changes the consumption of plastic globally. So consider leveraging the expertise inside institutions to make those big changes at scale. Now, how many of you are here are owners of businesses or managers? Can you raise your hand? Okay, fantastic. These next slides are here for you. Let's give you some reasons about why you should invest in intrapreneurship and hire those with an entrepreneurial skill set. The first is that the marketplace is changing very quickly. Avoid obsolescence. Let me show you some examples of this. There's a company called CB Insights that creates these wonderful data graphics. They predict trends in the marketplace. Let's take a look at two of their graphics. The first one is about Procter & Gamble. Procter & Gamble is a fast-moving consumer goods company. It has been around for over 150 years. And what you see here on the inside are all of their products. And on the outside are all of these small little startups shooting arrows of death at their products. On this page alone, there's 45 startups nibbling at the market share of Procter & Gamble. So exciting. Let's look at another one. Banking. Ooh, it's been around for so long. Now, again, in the middle, you have the services of a financial services company, a bank in the middle. And you have all of these startups around the side. There are over 100 startups on this page who are fundamentally changing the financial services industry as we see today. These images alone are compelling enough reason to invest in internal innovation. A multi-billion-dollar company with revenues of, let's say, $2 billion will look at these small startups and they'll say, oh, you're like termites. Individually, you look so small and harmless. But over time, and with so many of them, they have and are fundamentally transforming industries permanently. So, what is the solution? I like to propose intrapreneurship. Here are some famous examples of products that came out of intrapreneurship. We have the PlayStation, the iPod, the Post-it note, Gmail, all very famous, very successful products that came out of the ideas from intrapreneurs. Now, so I said as managers and business owners, the first reason why you want to invest in intrapreneurship is to avoid obsolescence, to keep up with the market. The second reason is because intrapreneurs get things done. They're the ones that are going to think outside of the job that you give them. They are the ones that problem solve. They're the ones that are willing to share ideas across different parts of your business. And they're the ones that are willing to take the risk to see the vision of a new product coming into market, and they are the future of your business. So having people like this in your business is absolutely critical for long-term success. Let's look at another reason or another element for long-term success. And we're going back to Gandhi because this is about impact at scale. And why should you as a business care? The reason why you as a business should care about this is because in this day and age, selling products and making more money is not enough to become a business leader. Customers, government, investors demand that businesses be an integral part of the communities they serve. Let's look at this quote by Haley Leibson. There's often a misconception that companies must be either purpose-driven or profit-driven. But this is really no longer the case, and let's look at some research that shows this. So there was a Harvard Business Review study that showed that employees that derived more meaning from their work reported twice the amount of job satisfaction and were 3 times more likely to stay with their employer. If that isn't convincing, we also see 9 out of 10 people willing to earn less money in order to do more meaningful work. So you have happy employees. The second is you have happier customers. 91% of consumers would switch brands if a different one was purpose-driven, given a similar price and quality. So when you have happy employees and you have happy customers, that really drives the bottom line. And 2 Harvard Business School professors has shown just this over a long-term study, that purpose and value-driven companies outperform their counterparts in the stock price by a factor of 12. That should be pretty convincing to take a look at the role of your business within society. Now, this is all very exciting. We're saying that entrepreneurship is going to be changing yourself and changing what you do in the world, but there are some challenges of entrepreneurship as well too. And I've heard a lot of talks today about how challenging doing innovation is here in Kazakhstan. Is that right? Yeah. Well, I don't know if this makes you feel any better, but it's challenging everywhere within a large corporate institution because there's structural reasons that this is the case. So you're not alone. Kazakhstan is not alone. Kazakhstan is not behind. Actually, it is just the same challenges that you see in large corporations. So the very first one, let's think about it. A corporation that has 5 million customers across 60 countries are going to have the processes and people in place to risk reduce and optimize. The reason why they do this is because they have a lot to lose. They have brand and reputation to lose. When you're a startup, all you have to lose is investor capital. I mean, really, that's not very much as compared to maybe P&G has 150 years of brand equity that could go like that from a bad Twitter feed. So they have quite a lot to lose, which means actually the work can be a lot slower and more frustrating. And I think that I've heard a lot of that in some of the discussions over this weekend around corporate innovation. And what that boils down to is fear. Fear of losing the assets that you have. Now, the second challenge to entrepreneurship is if you're an entrepreneur, you actually have to structure your idea and align it to the organization's strategy. And if you don't, you're going to get a lot of pushback. And the reason for that is they're going to say, oh, well, we don't do this. Or we're not in the business of whatever your idea is. So your idea needs to be aligned to the organization's strategy. And also, your idea, even though it's going to transform the business and transform the marketplace, will be compared to smaller investments that give you bumps in quarterly returns, but not make a difference overall. And again, what that boils down to is fear. Fear of getting, the next quarterly return. Now, I think you see where I'm going with this. Let's look at the last reason. The last reason is from Clay Christensen and his famous Innovator's Dilemma. Big businesses are going to look for returns in investments similar to the size of business they are. So if it's a business that makes billions of euros in profits, they're going to be looking for your return on investment at least 5 to 10% of that. And that's actually nearly impossible for a small startup. But guess what? The small startups are very happy to take the smaller opportunities. And that's why you see those images of the smaller ones nibbling away at market share, because the larger ones look at it and say, oh, it's too small for us. The other reason is that you have products that potentially could be cannibalized. If you're really trying to bring something new to the market, it potentially could take over the revenue stream of an existing product. Now, that's pretty scary. If you're a manager and you say, oh, actually, we're going to transform and replace all the products in the market, including ours, that's a kind of a hard sell sometimes. So cannibalization is another reason why this kind of innovation is very challenging. And let me give you an example, probably the most classic example of cannibalization. We've got Kodak films and the digital camera. So Kodak in 1975 invented the digital camera. And they were also the market leaders in film and print. But because they were completely invested in film and print, when they looked at the digital camera, they said, oh, no way, no thanks. And so instead of actually leading the transition into the next innovation in the marketplace, they actually were completely left behind. So again, that boils down to fear. So let's look at how can entrepreneurship help us tackle some of the world's biggest challenges. I've been talking a lot about this. Let's look at an example. What is this? This is complicated. This is the diagram of how we get food every day from Oxford University. So on the right-hand side here, we see people getting food. On the top, we see politics and government telling us what food we should eat, what policy is made that governs the food that can go in the market. Over here on the left-hand side, we've got farmers, and these farmers produce the food, and we've got this complex supply chain to get the food to us. This is really complicated, but what I told you before is that the trickiest problems in the world exist in systems like this. So in order to innovate and produce solutions at scale, you actually have to work within this system. Yeah? So if a government says that I want to improve health, I want to reduce disease, and just tells you eat a better diet, but they don't actually tell the companies to make better food, then what are you going to do? Because you all shop at the grocery store. So it's imperative that actually we look at large institutions and innovate with them as well. Let's look at some exciting examples of intrapreneurs live today. Okay, we have Miriam Sidibe at Unilever. Miriam has a public health background, and someone with her skills you might normally think would work at an NGO or a government, but instead she decided to work for a multinational business. And why is that? Because she wanted to put to practical application all that she had learned about hygiene and behavior change. So she created a public health campaign called the Unilever Lifebuoy hand washing campaign. And this hand washing campaign has been shown to improve the use of soap by a factor of 10. They also had a clinical study in India and showed that diarrheal disease reduced by 25%. That's one of the main killers of children under 5 years of age. In fact, 6.5 million children do not make it to age 5 every year. Now, she has been able to show to business how a public health campaign can both increase sales and save lives. How powerful. She has reached 183 million people in 16 countries. That's pretty impressive. Let's look at another example, a completely different industry, telecommunications. So Nick Hughes at Vodafone was the one that first started Kenya's first mobile payment platform. Now, when Nick originally proposed M-Pesa to Vodafone, they said, "We are not in the banking business." But he persisted, and he was able to find investment from the UK government through a challenge fund that was interested in investing in solutions to improve financial access for low-income communities. And today it's a happy story, because 15 million customers in Kenya now have access to financial services. A few fun facts about M-Pesa. Pesa is Swahili for money. Every year, M-Pesa has 1.7 billion in transactions. That's 48% of Kenya's GDP. That's 29 billion euros. In 10 years' time, they have expanded to 10 countries, and guess what? Every 500, they're responsible for 529 transactions per second. 529 transactions per second. That is not so bad for a business that's not a bank. All right, let's look at one more example about environmental conservation. This might be surprising to you. It was surprising to me. Now, we have Miriam Turner at Interface. How many people know what Interface is or what they do? Yeah, I didn't think many people would. Now, Interface is the world's largest designer and manufacturer of carpet tiles. Yes, carpet tiles. You see all these colorful squares behind her head? Those are carpet tiles. And you might think, oh, it's so boring to work for a company that makes carpet tiles. But think again, because Interface has a global mission called Climate Take Back. And their mission is to use 100% recycled materials in their carpet tiles. That is enormous. For the world's largest manufacturer of carpet tiles, that is a huge task, and the environmental impact on that is huge. It's enormous. So when Miriam heard of this goal, she was inspired and used her entrepreneurial spirit to create networks. She had found that her raw material supplier was able to make recycled yarn out of old fishing nets. So what she did was that she created networks, which collects old fishing nets from small fishing communities around the world, as well as large fisheries. And the reason why she does this is because old fishing nets in the ocean causes long-term degradation of marine life and endangers actually the marine life that coastal communities depend on for their livelihood. So networks works with communities that go and collect the fishing nets from the ocean. They use the old fishing nets to make carpet tiles, and then the communities get a little bit more money as well too. And today she's collected 224 tons of old fishing nets. She has impacted 64,000 people in coastal communities, and in 2022 her goal is to reach 1 million people and protect 1 billion square meters of ocean. So maybe not what you expected from a maker of carpet tiles. Okay, I've been talking a lot here, but I haven't told you about my story. So my story, I started my entrepreneurial journey about 10 years ago at Unilever. The first half of my career was working as a commercial strategy consultant. The second half, I worked in poverty alleviation with organizations like USAID and the UNDP. I observed that large companies actually play a very critical role in low-income communities by providing jobs, by providing high-quality services and products. So I approached Unilever, who's very heavily invested in developing countries, and I said I wanted to create a portfolio of new innovations and businesses focused specifically on the needs of low-income consumers. And my entrepreneurial pitch went something like this. If the water your customers, if the price that your customers pay for water is more expensive than the soap that you are selling, you have a huge market development opportunity. If you increase access to water for low-income communities, you will increase the sales of your products, you will increase social impact, and you will create genuine brand equity. Well, the good news is that it worked, and I worked for Unilever for about 5 years, developing a portfolio of innovations, including a product to prevent malnutrition in South Africa and Bangladesh, a safe drinking water business in Kenya, and also a technology to bring business tools to their micro-entrepreneurial network of about 29 million retailers across 90 countries. And so some of these initiatives worked and some of them didn't work. Some of them are to be continued. But what I know is that all of them contributed to the larger conversation of doing business and doing good. And the reason why I know this is because after 5 years, I was part of the supporting team to create a 40 million pound fund between Unilever and DFID, specifically focused on improving livelihoods, health, and the environment. Now, thank you. So what next? We are in day 3 of a wonderful festival. I'm going to end with a quote that I started with. The only way to discover the limits of the possible is to go beyond them into the impossible. I hope this afternoon I was able to show you what is possible with entrepreneurship. And maybe you didn't think some of those things were possible before. Now, ultimately, how we see ourselves directly impacts the actions we take in the world and the role we play in the world. So I would like to challenge all of you today to open up the definition of yourself, to see what is possible right now, right where you are now, whether you are at a startup, an NGO, government, a student, what is possible right now? Remember, entrepreneurship is a mindset. We must embrace failure. Think about what this guy says. Be the change you wish to see in the world. And remember, everything you ever wanted is on the other side of fear. Thank you very much.